What is sound? I mean, sound is part of the experience of being a human being in a body. It shapes our experience. It's very connected to memory.
Welcome to episode 10 of the Paddle and Portage podcast. This is M. Baxley.
I'm Joe Fredericks, and we're standing at the Laurentian Divide off the Gunflint Trail. Beautiful summer's evening, and we're marveling at the fact that this is the spot where the water in the Boundary Waters flows either north toward Hudson's Bay or east and south toward Lake Superior. Like, this is the spot, the Laurentian Divide.
Exactly. It's a important space because literally the water travels across continents in different directions from here. Most notably, we're sort of basking in the quiet of being on the edge of the Boundary Waters. In this fairly quiet evening, there aren't a lot of bird sounds. There isn't a lot of wind except for a gentle rustle of the aspen leaves. And both the water and the sound today take us to the same place that the water flows when it heads north.
And in particular, in this episode, we're going to talk about and travel to one spot on Rainy Lake called Mallard Island. And while we're there, we're going to listen to and experience and share stories related to sound. Rainy Lake is a massive body of water located on the far northwestern side of the Boundary Waters region. It's about 100 miles from Ely. It's here where a person named Ernest Oberholtzer lived for most of his adult life. He spent a majority of that time on a place called Mallard Island. He was referenced as Ober by his friends, and he was fascinated by the landscape and native peoples of the Quetico Superior country. He'd been told in his Iowa home after rheumatic fever at 17 that he had 1 year left to live. But he canoed to strength in the Northland here, in the Boundary Waters. He lived to be 93. In the 1920s, Ober became involved in the organized opposition of the industrial power development plan of Edward Backus and the Minnesota and Ontario Power Company. Backus' plan was to build a succession of dams, and it would have turned most of what is now Voyager National Park here on Rainy Lake, as well as much of the Boundary Waters, into a series of huge reservoirs. From 1927 and on, and with several prominent leaders, Ober worked for the public preservation of the Rainy Lake watershed. He was the permanent chairperson of the Quetico Superior Council, and he helped found the Wilderness Society. So to say that Ober has had an impact on the canoe country is clearly an understatement. Oberholtzer passed away decades ago, though his legacy lives on through the Oberholtzer Foundation. And it's here on Mallard Island that each summer, artists, Boundary Waters enthusiasts, and people who appreciate the legacy of Ober come to gather, create, and connect. In 2024, this gathering took place in mid-July. The unique structures that Ober designed and helped build on the island are, of course, part of the lore of the place and the experience. And indeed, there are many unique things to see on Mallard Island. There are also amazing smells with the unique forest and cedar, pine, birch, the scent of the lake from an east or west wind. There's the smell of wood smoke coming from one of the many unique cabins and structures on the island on a cool summer's night. And then there are the sounds.
I think the slowing down here and just paying closer attention to everything, you realize there's so much subtle variation in the sound, even in a place that you think of as being very quiet or silent. There's constant noise, really, but noise is not the right word. Sound There's constant sound, and it is so soothing rather than kind of the constant noise or sound of what we're used to in a built environment. Machines, humming, all sorts of other people breathing, making noise. But you hear people here moving around, doing their thing, having conversations in the background, the doors opening and closing.
25 years.
Yeah, I think it's just everything is heightened here. I'm Emma Froh. I'm here at Mallard Island.
Emma is an architect from the Twin Cities. This was her first time to Mallard Island. She and some of her colleagues were staying in what's known as the Cedarbark House, more commonly referred to as Cedar, around the island. The structure used to be a floating brothel on Rainy Lake before Oberholtzer bought it and stationed it on the edge of Mallard Island. Part of the structure still hangs over the edge of the shoreline, so water splashes on and under the building.
Staying at Cedarbark House, that water sound is constant, lapping at the sides of the house and under the house. I think the sound of water is definitely present everywhere, and especially with the rainstorms we've been having, it's the rhythm of the rain and the different pace and the size of the droplets are all, you can hear it. It's crazy.
Can I trouble you for a moment?
What's going on here? You getting interviewed?
Not necessarily. Not an interview per se.
Okay.
So I'm doing a thing about sounds of Mallard Island, right? Like the sounds of the island and how they... This is Natalya Egon, another architect who was on the island. Natalya's from Chicago. I caught up with her during an intense part of the thunderstorm. It had been raining for most of the day at Mallard. It was early in the going during our week-long residency here. I asked her how the rain and thunder were impacting her experience on the secluded island.
So where I live is not crazy loud. It's just different sounds, right? So it's not necessarily that it's quieter here. It's definitely not quiet, but in a lot of different ways. Yeah. This morning I went with my colleagues Mary and Emma to meditate at the top tip rock on the island, and I'm not good at meditating. Well, I have a hard time like clearing my mind, but the sounds of the raindrops on the water created like a really nice rhythm and thing to focus and pay attention to, because it was always changing. Like it wasn't just raining, it was drizzling, then it was raining, and then it stopped, and it was all accompanied by visually seeing the drops on the water. So
what about this stuff?
It's perfect timing. I actually find it not quiet here at all, and in a really intentional, slow way. It's been nice to be a lot more present. I'm used to drowning out sounds of cars and sirens and all that, and here I don't want to drown anything out.
Support for this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Tuscarora Lodge and Canoe Outfitters. They're located on Round Lake. Tuscarora is a full-service Boundary Waters outfitter serving Gunflint Trail entry points. Still time to plan your summer canoe trip and a cabin stay. You can check them out at TuscaroraCanoe.com or at Tuscarora Canoe on Instagram, their fantastic YouTube channel, and on Facebook.
This is Mark Savoy with Solbakken on Superior. Solbakken has 6 motel rooms and 6 charming cabins located on the shores of Lake Superior. The motel rooms are the perfect place to stop over either on your way in or your way out of the Boundary Waters canoe area. Visit our website at Solbakken on Superior to make your reservations today.
The sound of water, both the lake and the rain, shaped the early part of the experience for the group at Mallard. And while the rain came and went, the one constant was the sound of the birds on the island.
Hi, my name is Tanya Piatz, and I love to listen to the differences here versus where I come from. So like right now I'm listening to like white-throated sparrows. I can hear yellow-rumped warblers. There was an eastern phobie, and just kind of the quiet right now because we don't have any motorboats on the lake either, which is really great. We just had rain pass through the island, so everything's extra quiet except for the birds. They're definitely active right now. Where I'm from, central Minnesota, a lot of my background noise is cars. I live near a really busy highway, so there's just that constant hum of vehicles in the background. No matter how hard I try to create a landscape in my own backyard that reminds me of wilderness.
Not all the sounds coming from the trees were as soothing as the birds. Bambi and Dewey Goodwin had a cabin near the water's edge at Mallard during the Artist Week. Throughout their stay, they would occasionally hear the sound of munching or chewing. It wasn't the sounds of humans enjoying a snack at the Wanigan, that's the name of the kitchen building at Mallard. Rather, it was the larva of a white-spotted sawyer. That's a black beetle that peskily zooms around the Boundary Waters region.
Well, bonjour. This is Bambi Goodwin, and I'm at Rainy Lake, close to the Canadian border. And yesterday, I was listening out the window of our cabin, and I could hear this. And burning wood at our own home in Bemidji, I knew it was the sound of some kind of bugs in the wood. And boy, you could hear them chewing, and they went on and on. There must have been 2, 3 of them because there was different locations you could hear it from.
A quick departure from Mallard Island. We are up the Gunflint Trail, mid-trail area. Gonna run in and refuel at Loon's Nest Coffee. They're right here in the mid-trail area, and they're open from 7 a.m. until 2 p.m. through October, actually into late October. They're newer to the trail, but it's been very popular this summer for sure. They've got coffee in the wild as a theme of the business, and Bob and the crew are just really friendly, outgoing people. And so check out their coffee whenever you need to. We're going to step right over here off the Gunflint and pop in and get some ourselves.
I'm going to some coffee inside, Freddie. I'll see you in there.
Loon's Nest.
Oh, it's the best coffee on the Gunflint.
Bon Mott is a cultural researcher who traveled from Australia to take part in the Individual Artist Week at Mallard Island. They're spending time in Minnesota researching Indigenous history and current use of land and water in the state. Part of the research focuses on lightning and its origins in relation to the cosmos. Talking with Bon Mott is a bit like speaking with a unique cab driver in a huge city. You're never quite sure where the conversation's going to go next, but you're excited and clinging to every word all the same. I talked with Bon many times during the week-long residency at Mallard, and when we weren't talking about lightning or history, we were often talking about water.
I didn't expect the water to be so loud. So last night I finished reading and went to go downstairs on the ladder, and the water was so loud. You know, I expect the water to be kind of loud in the ocean, and because it wasn't particularly windy last night, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of sound coming off this water. It's really active. It must be very affected by the moon, and yeah, I think of Venus. I never thought Venus could live in a lake. You know, I thought Venus was very dependent on sea foam, but I like thinking about Venus and Jungian's interpretation of Venus, that Venus was the embryo before it was gendered.
And while we often talked about water, we also talked about insects.
This morning I got up at 5 and the sun hadn't come up yet, and I thought, I'll just go to bed for 2 20 minutes and meditate. And I must have brought a mosquito in with me. And as soon as I got into bed, the mosquito was so loud. It was probably the loudest mosquito I've ever heard. And I put the blankets over my head so that it wouldn't bite me and so I could meditate in peace. And it was still so loud. And I had 2 blankets over my face. I couldn't believe how loud it was. I'm like, this is one determined mosquito.
We here at Cascade Vacation Rentals know that life has a tendency to be overwhelming at times. Busy schedules often leave many people feeling overwhelmed and disconnected. That's why we're here, to offer you the space and opportunity to reconnect to what's important. We have one of the largest selections of privately owned vacation rental homes and cabins on Minnesota's North Shore of Lake Superior. Have access to the BWCA practically at your doorstep. Visit us online at cascadevacationrentals.com and book your dream getaway today.
Despite the chewing larvae and the buzzing mosquitoes, throughout the week, members of the group periodically drop words like paradise or heaven to describe the island. And while such sentiments are difficult to argue with, Rainy Lake is different than a body of water 6 or 7 portages in from the Echo or Gunflint Trail. Motorboats drive by, particularly as the weekend neared. Chainsaws buzzed occasionally on nearby islands. Rainy's more like a hybrid experience between the Gull Lake area near Brainerd and Saginaw Lake at the end of the Gunflint Trail. It's this and it's that. Though it's also its own space, its own energy. Mallard is a place of solitude, and it falls particularly quiet at night. Here's Emma.
The wind blowing through the trees is easier to hear at night, and the soft lapping of the waves against the island, and a gurgling noise underneath the Cedarbark House, and getting into all the nooks and crannies of the stone walls that surround the island is a unique sound. The bird song died down a little bit, so other things came to the front, like the bats moving around in the bat house and then coming out, and it's kind of like a thump, 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 thump of the bats flying around your head. Loons from far away. Yeah, it gets pretty quiet.
Oberholtzer died in 1997 at the age of 93. He's buried in Davenport, Iowa, which is his hometown. He's buried next to his mother, brother, and grandparents. Following his death, some of the children and grandchildren of his Ojibwe friends gathered here at Mallard Island. They made medicine and had ceremony blessing the island, protecting it forever. That's according to the Minnesota Historical Society, which now looks over more than 50,000 of Ober's papers and documents and things that he worked on over his career. Made me think about how hard people like Oberholtzer have worked to protect what's now called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, and it is now the most visited wilderness in the United States. So it's work like individuals like Oberholtzer who have helped protect this place. And organizations like the Friends of the Boundary Waters continue that work. They also acknowledge that the land and water that they work tirelessly to protect is on the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe people who were friends of Oberholtzer's. And they continue to live here in the area and exercise treaty rights on places like Rainy Lake and the land and water around the Boundary Waters. The Friends work to honor this living history and how the Anishinaabe relationship with land and water continues to grow and evolve, and that includes places like here at Mallard Island. You can learn more about the Friends on their website at friends-bwca.org. The study of and interaction with Ojibwe culture is a significant part of the experience when one stays at Mallard Island. And a part of that is through sound. That's Grandmother Drum, a presence that resides in physical and spiritual form on Mallard. The elder on the island, Pebaam, took a significant amount of time each day to share Ojibwe culture, history, and experiences with the group.
It's the vibrational energy of the drum. That's how she communicates. And the drum is the heartbeat of the nation. And at a powwow, it draws people together, brings them together. Sound is the conduit of the vibration of the universe.
For the three architects who came to Mallard, witnessing the transformation from the Monday thunderstorms to the end of the week on Friday was a significant journey, even a transformation from the intense energy they all carried upon arrival to the more laid-back approach they all felt by the end of the week. The third architect in the group, Mary Springer, was noticeably more outgoing from the start of the week to the end, as is often the case with people who come to Mallard Island. It's not the sort of place you just leap into, necessarily. After all, you're thrust onto this patch of land situated in a massive body of water with essentially complete strangers.
This week has been glorious, and the sound impacted that in so many ways. I think the rhythm and the lapping of the lake water is soothing and a good reminder of where we are, even when you're not so aware of your surroundings. Like when you wake in the middle of the night and that sound continues to provide a rhythmic kind of lullaby. The birds communicating with each other kind of create a spatial awareness of the whole island all at once.
Coincidentally, the architects worked through exercises that involve sound prior to having knowledge that I was producing an episode of the podcast about the sounds of Mallard Island. They called it a sound map.
Well, I think all of these exercises that we've been doing this week are really prompts for mindfulness. It gives you a structure, framework to use to pay attention to the world around you instead of letting your brain get ahead of you, thinking of the past or the future. It anchors you in time by giving you just enough to think about. So the sound map was effective in that way. It made you aware of the space and the volume of space around you, and it made you remain in the present moment.
The lifestyle that Oberholtzer created at Mallard was indeed a blend of natural simplicity and cultural sophistication. As Joe Paddock shares in the book Keeper of the Wild, The Life of Ernest Oberholtzer, there's a copy of the book inside many of the structures spread across Mallard Island. The architects said they didn't come necessarily to gain a spiritual connection. It was supposed to be a work trip, though it clearly turned into something much more, and a big part of that they shared was their experiences and connections they made through sound.
I definitely was aware that the sound had a big role to play in the experience of the island. I think we came ready for that, curious about it, and it turned out to be a big part.
Well, some of the birds are starting to sing their evening chorus here off the Gunflint Trail at the Laurentian Divide, just as the birds were often a source of sound and accompaniment at Mallard Island, as we heard from the architects and Bon, Tanya, Pebaam in the episode today.
It's another great example about how our experience of place can be so transformative, and that every one of our senses play a role in that imprint on our brain, especially the sound.
Just like this car that's about to drive past will hear it. We can hear it approaching. And soon you'll be able to pick it up, you the listener on the mic, as it's approaching. Here comes a car, which is something we didn't hear at Mallard Island because we were on an island.
No cars.
No cars. Boats, though.
Boat traffic.
Yeah. So these are the sounds of the place. That's a sound of the Gunflint Trail right there.
And they imprint on our memory and become as much a part of our existence as anything else, especially our transformations.
As we heard from Emma and Mary and Natalya, that journey they experienced, that personal journey at Mallard, was linked to sound. It was just really interesting to experience and observe that, and also incorporate that into my own experience at Mallard as well.
Anybody who leaves their windows open in a hot summer's night knows that all too well. Whether you live rural and hear the crickets or the night birds, or you're in the city and you hear car doors and engines. Place.
I want to use this opportunity while we're talking about sound to give a shout out to someone who we met years ago at Canoecopia, who first talked to us about the sound of the Boundary Waters. And that really was the inspiration, quite frankly, for this episode, to link that back into that conversation we had with someone who really had done some sound recording in the Boundary Waters, shared that with us, talked to us about it. And it's impacted me and influenced how I connect and experience the Boundary Waters, and still to this day. So that's a direct tie to this episode.
I couldn't agree more. And I remember you and I sitting together, literally doing the research on what acoustic ecology was and who these acoustic ecologists are. And yeah, forever changed.
Oh, right. Another car coming on the Gunflint, and to think about these sounds, even the motorboats at Mallard, and not get into a negative aspect of it necessarily.
All part of place.
It was a part of the place. We're at Voyageurs National Park on the edge of it there at Mallard, and that's the use there. That's the experience people are having, and it's different from the BWCA largely, although there's times off of Poplar Lake on a quiet summer night where we could be fishing, and you can hear the Gunflint when a logging truck goes by or a bigger vehicle. You can hear people in the Boundary Waters, vehicles.
Absolutely.
Some curious onlookers as we're recording the podcast.
Yeah, I think we just scared them off with our. There they go, waving and smiling. Big old grins. Those look like some trail kids to me. Maybe some trail rats, as a friend of mine recently said. Yeah, I had this experience today, actually, this morning. I was shoveling a bunch of clay down in my land, and I knew there was rain in the forecast, and I was hoping the rain would hold off. And I was just kind of in the zone, not just listening and shoveling to the sounds of the woods, which wasn't much. And I heard a faint patter that turned into a kind of like a hum. And I paused what I was doing, and I could tell that it was the sound of thousands of raindrops hitting thousands of leaves in the distance. And I heard it slowly coming closer, long enough that I covered up my work just as that thousands of raindrops reached me.
That's amazing.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
Sound. God bless it.
Well, and particularly when we're producing the podcast, which we've been doing for years and years as a team, that sometimes I overlook or don't even think about what we do here is tell stories with sound.
Absolutely.
That the human voice is part of the sound of the place.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that I was reminded of at Mallard in particular, that the human component of our experience at Mallard was largely tied to voice. And so I would just want to say thank you to everybody that took time out of their schedule and their experience at the island, from Emma, Natalya, Mary, Pebaam, Bambi,
Dewey?
Sweet Dewey.
Yeah, come on, Dewey.
Yeah, we'll be hearing plenty more about Dewey in future stories to come. And Dewey is an amazing Ojibwe artist that lives here in Minnesota, and we've got a lot of stories coming about Dewey Goodwin and things related to paddle and portage and beyond. But also thanks to Tanya, of course, who was the caretaker on the island.
We love you, Tanya.
Tanya was just so fantastic to hang out with that week and led the experience for the group, essentially. And just everybody that was there that week. Just thank you for sharing your stories with us and here on the podcast. Summer nights on the Gunflint Trail. Bon Mott!
Like to sing when I paddle canoe, feeling not thinking if the strokes are true. We're gonna get through to the other side. Out in the night, the waves beat the shore. You can hear them pounding, you can hear them roar. Oh, roll me, rock me in my dreams. You can roll me, rock me in my dreams. So I like to sing, I love to dance. I play the fool if I got the chance. All around the campfire light, all around the campfire light, all round, all round, all round the campfire light.
Mosquito on your leg. Oh, you didn't get it. It's still alive.
I gave him something to think about.
That's true.
Do you get any at night?
In the house? No.
Buzzing around your ears?
Mm-mm. Our house is pretty good. Keep them out. What is sound? Sound is part of the experience of being a human being in a body. It shapes our experience. It's very connected to memory.